Hey everyone, it's Tim here for a midweek update, and I want to reflect on some things from our Equipping Hour series on meekness and quietness of spirit, something that didn't really have a place to fit in with the lessons we've had. But I made brief reference at one point to Jesus' triumphal entry and his temple cleansing and this idea of meekness, and I want to zoom in on that a little more. Because when we talk about meekness, we're talking about, as come up many times in the course now, the rational control of our passions, especially our negative emotions, especially anger. Governing our anger with reason and with truth and with wisdom as this Christ-like virtue that the Lord wants us to exhibit and is empowering us to exhibit as his people. And the contrast to meekness is a response of anger that can be uncontrolled. We could say things like flying off the handle or going into a rage. And there are various pictures of this that we have. We've all done it at various times in various ways. We've seen other ones around us do it. Somebody in the class mentioned the Dude Perfect Rage Monster, this video series from these YouTubers. And if you don't know about it, don't waste your time. I watched like one video and I kind of wish I could have my time back. But anyway, just the idea of somebody, a character, or the Incredible Hulk, somebody who gets up into a rage, flies off the handle, and is in this completely destructive mode. And there's not a sense of restraint, or is that a good idea to destroy that thing? It's just anything and everything in sight I'm going to destroy. Now, one objection that can come up when we talk about the rational control of anger and this idea of tameness is also part of meekness is the objection. I can hear it now, and people have brought this up in various contexts. What about Jesus cleansing the temple? Isn't this the one example we have of Jesus flying into a rage? It seems maybe that way on first reading, if we're just envisioning the picture of Jesus entering the temple, seeing people buying and selling livestock, of course, making a profit in the Lord's house of worship. And he's going, this is so corrupt, this is so not right. And he flies into a rage. He flies off the handle. He destroys everything in sight. He drives them all away. And see, even Jesus, even there's times that it's appropriate to get into that kind of mode of anger. I actually will argue in just a minute here that two of the gospel writers take great care to show us and tell us specifically that that's not what Jesus is doing, that initial impression is wrong. Matthew has a way of demonstrating that to us. He tells us. And what he does is, what happens right before the temple, Jesus is coming into the temple. He's entering Jerusalem for the week of Passover and ultimately the week of his cross and resurrection. But the first thing he does in Jerusalem is go to the temple and find what he finds and does what I just described. But what happens before is he enters Jerusalem. It's a triumphal entry. And Matthew's account of the triumphal entry in Matthew 21, verse 5, he reaches for language from Zechariah 9 in describing what are we seeing here as Jesus enters on a donkey in particular. He says, say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. And our ESV says humble, but that's the same word, meek, that's shown up all over in the series and in our key text, 1 Peter 3:4 and elsewhere. So I don't think the donkey is meant to convey Jesus' lowliness in terms of means. A lot of people didn't even have donkeys. I think the picture is sort of an implied contrast with a king on a war horse. You have this idea of a king entering a city to take his rule, and it's like, this is a scary moment. We would maybe imagine naturally for this to be a violent moment. A king coming and riding with a sword flashing on a horse, which is more like a second coming picture of Jesus. But what we have in this first coming is the meekness of Jesus coming on a donkey. There's tameness there. This idea, he's not coming to inflict violence. And so Matthew, having shown us that about Jesus, that he's coming on a donkey and telling us that this indicates meekness, the very next little account we have in Matthew is Jesus doing this, the temple. He enters the temple, he drives out those who buy and sell in the temple, and he says to them, my house should be called the house of prayer, and so on, telling them this is inappropriate what you're doing here. So that tells us, that governs our reading of this temple cleansing incident in Matthew, and tells us Jesus is controlled. He's tame in the extension of his anger, even though there is an angry response to true evil. John's way of doing it is a little different. John doesn't tell us, John just shows us meekness. And I love this little detail, and others have pointed this out too, other commentators. But in John 2, verses 14 to 16 is where that account of the temple cleansing, and it says, in the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And now in verse 16, he's going to address the pigeons, those who sell the pigeons, which was one of the animals that people would buy because it was one of the animals sacrificed. And we might imagine at this point, if we're going like Rage Monster Jesus, who's flying off the handle and just into kind of indiscriminate destruction mode, that Jesus would grab cages, presumably the pigeons are in some kind of cage, and start smashing them on the ground and letting pigeons fly around everywhere and escape. But he doesn't do that. So he gets a whip, he does use a whip, and he drives out the sheep and oxen, the livestock, the beasts that are driven. He drives them all out with a whip along with the people with him. And then he told, verse 16, he told those who sold the pigeons, take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade. So he does what he has to do to get them out. To drive out these larger beasts, you use a whip, you drive them out. But he's not trying to be destructive. He's not trying to inflict unnecessary pain. And he's not trying to, even these people who are selling these animals, he's not trying to cause them to lose their property. He doesn't want to smash up the pigeon cages or whatever kind of containers they're in and let the pigeons fly away and the people don't have their pigeons. Even though these people are sinning, he just says, you got to get these out of here. You can't do this here. This is an inappropriate use of the temple. And so there is an angry response. There is an authoritative commanding presence. You have to leave. You cannot do this. But he is using, we could say, the minimum necessary force to accomplish this. And he's not being extra destructive. He's not being gratuitous in his display of anger. He's being very measured. He's being very controlled. And this is this perfect picture of anger that is under the control of reason, under the control of wisdom, under the control of righteousness. It's so beautiful in Jesus' life. And what we're going to see in our continuation of our series in Equipping Hour at 9 o'clock on Sunday, we'll be gathering to hear biblical examples of meekness, several characters in the Bible, Jesus being the most preeminent, no surprise there. What it looks like, not only in moments like this, but all throughout his life and ministry as we have him in the Gospels. What does Jesus' meekness look like? And then, in God's providence, this is not all master planned by me or anyone else, but by God, that in our sermon at Corporate Worship 10:30, we're gathering to worship, and the sermon will continue in Mark chapter 14, looking at verses 60 to 65, and looking at continuation of Jesus' trial, where he will exhibit remarkable meekness in the face of corrupt charges that are brought against him. So I hope we just get to see Jesus in the beauty of his, not only him as God in the flesh, but him as the perfect man, exhibiting human emotions in a righteous manner that can seem so foreign to us as we're so prone to struggles with out of control anger. So I want to invite you to come Sunday for those. And also at 5 o'clock Sunday evening, we have our community groups continuing to talk in a small group setting about things we've learned from God's Word and encourage one another and pray and so on. So info on the community groups are in the newsletter and in the bulletin. Want to commend those to you, as well as other things going on in the life of the church to take a look at. So I look forward to seeing you Sunday, and until then, have a blessed rest of your week. All right, bye-bye.